Right Honourable Prime Minister Luxon had to leave us early for understandable reasons. Minister Macleay, above all, leaders of the business community, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Kia ora. It is a privilege and pleasure to address the China Business Summit again. And thank you, Simon and Fran, for the kind invitation. Over the years, the summit has evolved to become a go-to platform for deepening China-New Zealand mutual understanding and advancing our bilateral relationship. A relationship that matters for both countries, but stands at a critical juncture for at least two reasons. First, we'll soon celebrate the 10th anniversary of the establishment of the comprehensive strategic partnership between us, yet another major milestone in our relationship. And second, profound changes are taking place both in the international environment and in our respective countries, such that today's summit carries even more significance for the two sides to chart the course for our future cooperation. It is no secret that practical economic and trade cooperation is an integral part of China-New Zealand relationship. Given many of you present here today are participants, contributors, and stakeholders in relation to what happens on that front, perhaps I'll start by sharing some of my observations on the state of the China's economy and what it means for the relationship. For the past 50-odd years since the establishment of our diplomatic ties, in particular the last decade since the upgrade of the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, bilateral economic and trade cooperation has made significant and rapid progress. China, as has been pointed out by both the Prime Minister and Minister Macleay, China has been New Zealand's largest trading partner, largest export market, and largest source of import for over 10 years now. Working together has delivered tangible benefits to the two countries and particularly the two peoples. In fact, the footprint for the evolution of our economic ties is closely correlated to the trajectory of China's own reform and opening up, which has been a consistent and powerful source of expansion in our bilateral trade. China has grown to become the second largest economy in the world, and by some measures, it is already the largest. Its economic transformation has nurtured an increasing number of middle-income earners, a maturing supersized market with rising appetites for quality products and services. China's trade in goods has ranked first globally for 7 years in a row. It is also the major trading partner for over 140 countries and regions, including New Zealand. As for China's economic outlook, intriguingly, there are now, in some Anglo-Saxon media, two diametrically opposing narratives. One says that China has already peaked as an economy. And some naysayers even come to the conclusion that China is on the brink of imminent collapse. The other narrative says that the Chinese economy is so strong so as to threaten flooding the rest of the rest of the world market with its overcapacity. By common sense, these two opposing narratives cannot be right at the same time. Going deeper, they're in fact both wrong. Let's first unpack the so-called peak China theory. Indeed, the pace of the country's economic growth has slowed somewhat as compared to some of the previous years. But the Chinese economy, defying both internal and external headwinds, managed to register a 5.2% year-on-year growth in 2023, faster than most other major economies. It's no small feat for a $30 trillion economy. And according to the latest data, the country's GDP grew by 5.3% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2024. And from January to April this year, China's foreign trade value registered a growth of 9.8% year-on-year, faster than widely anticipated. For many years, China contributed more than 30% on average to world economic growth. Looking into the future, China will remain an important powerhouse, driving global growth for many years to come. The IMF's latest report forecasts that for the next 5 years, meaning through 2029, China will contribute at least 21% of global growth, bigger than all of the G7 countries combined. More importantly, the Chinese economy is now undergoing profound transformations, focusing more on the high-quality development rather than high-speed growth. This means we will promote higher quality growth while increasing economic output in the coming years. What's even more significant is that the high-tech industry in China has grown exponentially, with new quality productive forces emerging at an accelerating pace. China's total input in R&D and investment in the high-tech sector have been growing at double-digit rates for several years running, enabling China to take the lead in the number of patent applications in increasing technology sectors. China's high-speed railroad network continues to expand and upgrade. The country has also emerged as a global leader in 5G, aerospace, electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, photovoltaic products, etc. And notably, a large part of the above has been achieved despite the constant technological blockades, embargoes, and protectionist measures leveled against Chinese companies by the US-led efforts to erect even higher walls, ever higher walls, around allegedly small yards that keep expanding. All of this, again, speaks volumes about the resilient and innovative nature of the Chinese economy and the promising prospects for its long-term growth. Furthermore, China remains steadfast in promoting opening up as its basic national policy and is committed to building an open world economy as well as promoting economic globalization, featuring inclusiveness and universal benefits. The Belt and Road Initiative, as has been previously mentioned, is widely welcomed by the international community as a cooperation platform for China to enhance connectivity and share development opportunities with the rest of the world. With continuous upgrading in both quantity and quality, BRI keeps injecting new impetus to the world economy and breaking new ground for global development, growing in that process into a major platform for international economic cooperation. In that process as well, the geographical configuration of China's foreign trade is being put on a more balanced, stable, and sustainable footing, with a higher proportion of cooperation with the Global South and the BRI partners. Second, the notion that there's massive overcapacity in China is at best misguided, which is nothing but another ploy to hold China back. The growth of industries in China is fully consistent with supply and demand and the dynamics of comparative advantage. Our leading edges in some high-tech sectors are gained through years and, in some cases, decades of painstaking hard work driven by performance and full-on market competition. Looking back, it is some of the Western industrial countries that preached to China in its early stages of development the virtues of an open market, free trade, and sustainability. We took that advice very seriously, and perhaps too seriously, and made the strategic choice of reform and opening up in line with our own national conditions and global market trends in the late 1970s and has since gone on to become a staunch supporter and, above all, a faithful practitioner of globalization. China has fulfilled all its commitments and obligations under WTO and its FTAs with other countries and regions, including New Zealand, delivering remarkable development for itself and at the same time contributing to global growth. And then, ironically, some of the very countries having lectured us in the first place have ditched their own sermons. It also turns out that the fair competition, comparative advantage, or free trade they espouse is but a game that must be won by them and them alone, and is for everyone else to lose. With what they've been doing, they are, in the words of the Swedish Prime Minister recently, destroying global trade, as they have castrated the rules-based multilateral trading system we all rely on and cast out of the window the same rule books they have brandished and thrown at everyone else. And that also reveals the true colors of their much trumpeted rules-based international order, which in actuality only means that I rule and I order, and that you are ruled and can only do what I order you to. Demand-wise, the world counts on the high-tech green industry as a major pathway to tackle climate change, as the green transition can only be achieved through technological progress and market mechanisms. In fact, according to the International Energy Agency, to realize carbon neutrality, the world will need 45 million new energy vehicles by 2030, 4.5 times that of the demand in 2022. When the global capacity is still far below the market demand, how could there be overcapacity? Based on market principles, China has made steady progress in the new energy area, delivering global public goods such as photovoltaic products, wind farm facilities, and EVs, which helps to enable not only China, but also the broader international community to transition to a low-carbon economy at affordable cost. Some people have argued that the strongest evidence of the so-called overcapacity is that China exports too much and accounts for an excessive amount of global market share. If that makes any sense, the US and EU should have stood accused of overcapacity for decades, since the airliners produced by them have a market share of over 90% for many years. They will tell you, of course, that it's different, as both Boeing and Airbus meet a demand. But so do BYD and XPeng. In fact, China's new energy industry mainly meets the needs of the domestic market, exporting only about 12% of Chinese-made EVs to other countries. If this amounts to overcapacity, then what about Germany, Japan, and US, who export 80, 50, and 25% respectively of their manufactured automobiles? If, by their own standard, this shouldn't have taken place. And if that is the case, there wouldn't be much trade taking place among countries, and the world would be a much more poorer place for that reason. Obviously, the so-called China overcapacity narrative and the policy measures they're used to justify is yet another example of politicizing economic issues and weaponizing trade policies blatantly as a tool for what they claim to be fair competition. This largely explains why we reject the use of competition to define relationships among countries. As in competitions, there will inevitably be winners and losers. Businesses can compete according to market rules and principles, and when a business loses in a competition, and you know better than me about this, it may simply fold in a process of constructive destruction. Contrastingly, no country would want to or afford to lose, because countries don't just simply fold. And that is why competitions between countries will easily generate into an all-out, no-holds-barred, escalating rivalry, confrontation, or even conflict. This, I'm afraid, is no good news for either the individual countries or the deeply interconnected global economy, in that it will distort trade, block innovation, undercut growth, and undermine our respective and common efforts to improve people's lives and tackle global challenges. And all this may come on top of these competitions being deeply and most probably dangerously destabilizing for regional and global peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, the economies of China and New Zealand are highly complementary. Our bilateral cooperation on that basis has come a long way. The success story has only been possible with the partnership responding to the evolving demands from both sides and fully leveraging comparative advantages for mutual benefits. China is willing to work with New Zealand to consolidate this mutually beneficial relationship, generating more tangible results for our two peoples. To make this happen, we need to follow a two-pronged approach, or as we say in China, to walk on two legs. Keep the momentum and aim even higher in the traditional sectors of a collaboration, such as goods and services trade, and at the same time, explore new growth areas aligned with our respective domestic development agenda, such as infrastructure, technology and innovation, green development, and stable and resilient supply chains. At present, China is vigorously pursuing an economic transition towards, again, high-quality development by fostering new quality productive forces. Likewise, the New Zealand coalition government is prioritizing economic stabilization and recovery, lowering the cost of living, improving the environment for doing business, streamlining and upgrading the structure of the economy, and improving productivity. There's huge room for our two countries to continue to be mutually helpful partners, to empower each other to achieve greater success based on our respective demand and comparative advantage. Indeed, robust economic cooperation has always been a strong pillar of the broad bilateral relationship. However, the thriving economic ties couldn't have grown in a vacuum. Rather, it is intimately related to the sound development of our overall relationship. It is fair to say that the leap in our economic and trade cooperation wouldn't have been possible without the steady growth of our broader relationship. We're glad to note that the two have formed a positive loop of mutual support and mutual promotion, thanks to efforts on both sides. With the conclusion and above all the implementation of our now upgraded bilateral FTA, two-way trade between us has expanded exponentially. Notably, China has almost consistently registered deficits vis-à-vis New Zealand. But this has never diminished China's willingness and enthusiasm about growing our trade for New Zealand. In this connection, China has time again demonstrated that we honor our words and are committed to progressively opening up our market for win-win outcomes. By contrast, certain other countries claim to be New Zealand's friends with shared values, but nonetheless either refuse outright to open their markets to New Zealand or choose to eat their own words when it suits them. As far as China is concerned, when we make a promise, we shall deliver. More importantly, we never turn our back on our friends that work with us in good faith. China and New Zealand are divergent in history, culture, social system, and development stage. It is only natural that we see some issues differently. The challenge, though, is to manage these differences through constructive dialogues without allowing these differences to define, let alone disrupt, the development of the relationship. It is true that the world around us is undergoing some profound and complex changes, with upending upheavals and even turmoils. Yet no matter how the international landscape evolves, China remains committed to supporting true multilateralism, resolving disputes through peaceful means, and upholding the international system with the UN at its core and the international order based on international law to promote world peace and stability. Meanwhile, we will remain steadfast in safeguarding our own sovereignty, security, and development interests, as all countries would do. In recent years, there's been a saying that China has become increasingly aggressive in regional and international affairs. However, a closer look at China's posture will tell you that in most cases, the way we have conducted ourselves has largely been responsive or even defensive, preferring to resolve the disputes peacefully in the face of attempts to encroach on our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and other key legitimate interests, or in face of naked provocations. Not all other countries would respond the same way under similar circumstances. It shouldn't be a surprise that some may even opt to bomb their way out, just as they have done repeatedly in their own and recent world history. Currently, there are voices both in and outside New Zealand framing the so-called China threat theory, attempting to persuade New Zealand to perceive China as a threat. But the truth is, there are neither historical grievances nor fundamental conflicts in interest between our two countries. The fact that our commonality far outweighs our differences remains unchanged. The complementarity of our interests remains unchanged, and the enormous room for cooperation between our two sides remains unchanged. China is not a threat to New Zealand. Rather, as has been pointed out by both the Prime Minister and Minister Macleay, China represents for New Zealand an opportunity and a mutually beneficial partner. The more complex the global situation is, the more noise we hear, the more courage and wisdom we will need to manage our differences constructively. More than ever, we need dialogues rather than megaphone diplomacy. We must not close our eyes and minds to realities and give space to groundless accusations or speculations, which would erode the precious trust we have built up to underpin the healthy development of bilateral relations, and particularly the mutually beneficial cooperation that is valued by both countries. In this connection, I would also like to touch briefly on the recent debate here in New Zealand on AUKUS, given its relevance to the mutual trust between China and New Zealand. China does have serious concerns on AUKUS, as it has serious implications for the international nuclear non-proliferation regime and efforts to keep the region nuclear-free. It also threatens to start a regional arms race and lead to escalating tensions. You may have noticed that top US diplomats have stated, as has been registered by Fran, that the purpose of AUKUS is to preserve US primacy, and they have openly linked AUKUS nuclear submarines with the situation in the Taiwan Strait. This confirms that AUKUS is a nuclear-based military nature alliance, clearly and unabashedly designed to maintain US hegemony and contain other countries' development. Joining such an alliance will not make any country more secure or make the Asia-Pacific region more stable. The sole purpose of the second pillar is to serve and support nuclear-related military cooperation under the first pillar, rather than being an innocent platform for technology sharing. Even many people in New Zealand and beyond believe that joining such an alliance in whatever form is indeed taking sides. China has always respected the sovereignty of other countries, which naturally includes the making of their foreign policies. However, it is one thing for a country to develop relationships with countries that are not alike or even don't like each other, but it is quite another to join a military alliance openly targeting other countries. From the painful lessons of human history, military alliances are better at winning wars rather than keeping the peace. By binding others and even retired regions to the war chariot of countries seeking hegemony, military alliances tend to exacerbate confrontation and trigger, escalate, and expand conflicts rather than the contrary. Counting on military alliances to maintain peace is a poisoned chalice about which we shouldn't harbor any illusions. Not long ago, I went to attend the Anzac Day memorial service in Wellington, which was unfortunately cancelled due to bad weather. The towering, when I looked, but I got there, and when I looked at the monument, the towering structure stands as silent testimony to the scourge of war, reminding us of the lessons we should learn from history. Over 10,000 New Zealand soldiers were killed or wounded in World War II. For China, the number of casualties encompassing both military and civilian death and injuries in the same war is a staggering 35 million. Having emerged from the conflagrations of wars, the Chinese people cherish most keenly the value of peace. Though history is sometimes sobering to revisit, it must never be forgotten. Coming back to AUKUS, at the end of the day, it will be a call for New Zealand to make. But we hope and trust that New Zealand will eventually make its decision, taking into account its own long-term fundamental interests, as well as the imperative to promote the healthy and stable development of our bilateral relations and to preserve the hard-won peace in the region and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the establishment of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between our two countries. The celebrations offer us a significant opportunity to take stock of what has been achieved and at the same time look ahead at future steps we could take together. On our part, the commitment to developing the relationship with New Zealand is firm and clear, and we want to continue to see New Zealand as a good friend and as an important partner. For China, the cooperation with New Zealand has no forbidden areas, and our friendship has no limits. But it takes two to tango, and for that reason, the future of our bilateral relations depends on efforts from both sides. On the basis of mutual respect and accommodation, focusing on cooperation and benefiting the people, we look forward to working together with the New Zealand side to take our relationship to the next level, to better benefit the two countries and particularly the two peoples, and at the same time make positive contribution to regional and global peace, stability, and prosperity. With that, I conclude my remarks and thank you for your patience. Kia ora.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for, I think, what we've come to expect from you, a typically thoughtful and, on this occasion, thought-provoking contribution. And can I also say, whilst diplomatic, refreshingly straight. I think you effectively skewered that caricature we've seen in the past of, which I put to Minister Macleay, of peak China versus, I suppose, flooding the world with overcapacity. And that 5.2, 5.3% growth you've talked about, which I think, again, Mr. Macleay referred to as sort of a new Indonesia every year, from a country with possibly negative growth at the moment, is somewhat enviable. I want to pick up on something you stated, and that I know is a phrase of President Xi, unleashing new productive forces, which I take to be more investment in high advanced manufacturing, EVs, green tech, and the like. Talk to us about what you think that means for New Zealand.
Well, thank you, Simon. The new quality productive forces are cutting-edge, state-of-the-art technologies, very often game changers that help to generate new products, new business models, new businesses, and sometimes even whole new industries. And that is taking place in China very quickly, as in some of the other countries as well. And that, first and foremost, brings enormous opportunities for China's own growth, as it is making that transition to, as I said, to high-quality development. But at the same time, that will open up new frontiers for opportunities for different countries to work together, including between China and New Zealand. As has been mentioned by some previous speakers, that increasingly we see BYD and other branded Chinese-made electric vehicles running on New Zealand streets. And I was in Nelson over the weekend, and Nick Smith, the mayor, told us that Nelson is very proud to have one of the first all-electric bus fleet in New Zealand. So that shows that how, I think, New Zealand and China could work together in that space, taking advantage and building upon these new opportunities emerging, brought forth by the adoptions of some of these new quality productive forces. That will help to open up new possibilities and helping us to make the necessary transition that will have to take place for both of us, and contributing at the same time to global efforts to tackle climate change and other common challenges.
It's been interesting this morning, Your Excellency, to hear of a Prime Minister speak of pet food, now $100 million in your country. Gaming was one I hadn't thought so much of vis-a-vis China. In your view, what does the business community need to do on all this, and what are our opportunities to continue to see growth from the China-New Zealand relationship, so that in a New Zealand sense it isn't peak China?
Well, we have already built up a very solid relationship, and trade is one of the strongest pillars. We have made, as has been pointed out, we have made tremendous progress in some of the traditional areas. Two-way trade in dairy, in meat, in forest products. But there are emerging areas that promise great opportunities for both of us. And I understand that for the new coalition government, there are many priorities in the economic domain, and almost in all of these areas, China could be a useful partner. And we are ready to work with the New Zealand side in ways that will be comfortable for New Zealand, and that in ways that will make sense for both of us in a mutually beneficial manner. And for that reason, my advice to New Zealand businesses and perhaps some of the Chinese businesses present here today as well, be ambitious, but you have to work very hard. As I said, the Chinese market, while it develops, while it continues its process of opening up, is becoming more competitive at the same time. So to continue the success story you have built for New Zealand businesses, you have to compete very hard. But I think New Zealand businesses have already built up a solid foundation for that, because as the first Western countries to have entered into a bilateral FTA and have done an upgrade for that, New Zealand does have some first mover advantage. But at the same time, there's no room for complacency. For example, in the area of meat, as has been pointed out by some of the media reports, there are now 42 countries exporting meat and meat products to China. So inevitably, it's going to be a more competitive market. But you have a solid base. You have cultivated the Chinese market for many years, establishing the networks, the connections, and of course, the challenge is to make full use of that, to build upon those connections and those networks, go into some of the newer niche markets and going into some of the newer geographies as well. But out there, as has been pointed out by the Prime Minister and Minister Macleay, there are huge opportunities on the Chinese market, and we should work hard on both sides to seize those opportunities.
Very competitive market. We can't be complacent. You've done a great job, Your Excellency, of preempting my questions on so-called China containment and AUKUS. If I can finish with this, though, and a question around this. You know, if we think about the last 30 years, maybe a bit longer even, the China-New Zealand relationship has gone from strength to strength. We see that in the numbers. I think if we're being objective, though, look, we're in a more complex geopolitical environment, and that's being tested. I'd be interested in your sense of the state of the relationship right now. Are we in good heart? Are there concerns, though, that we should be thinking a lot about? How do you see the relationship 10 years on from the China Business Summit, some 40, 50 years on from the diplomatic relationship?
Yep. I think, again, repeating myself, the relationship is standing at a critical juncture. 10 years after the establishment of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, 50 plus years after the diplomatic relationship, and more than 10 years since the start of the summit process. I think the relationship is going from strength to strength. I agree with that assessment. And look at the figures, the trade, the people-to-people connections. And I think what is more important is that on top of that, we have the increasing trust between us. That is the result of efforts, I think, on both sides. Indeed, we have a challenging and complex international environment, but that doesn't lessen by one iota the need for countries like New Zealand and China to work together. And that actually makes it more important for us to work together, both bilaterally, but also in the regional and global context as well. Because we share a lot of common interest, even globally and regionally. Both support a functioning multilateral trading system, a functioning United Nations, and we see some increasing challenges on that front, but it's very important that countries like New Zealand and China and some of the others that share our common interest in making them continue to work, we should come together and make our voices heard and make sure that these mechanisms will continue to function in the interest of countries like New Zealand and China, but more importantly, in the interest of the broader international community. So I see huge prospects, positive prospects going forward for the relationship, not only bilaterally, but more broadly on some of these international and regional issues as well.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thoughtful and straight, Ambassador of China in New Zealand, His Excellency Wang Xiaolong.